Hello, Maddie, aka Hello Interloper here. I realized I could kind of reduce the size of my crazy logo and still pretty much block out my name and avatar, so I went ahead and did that, so you're going to be able to see a little more. And once again, I apologize for the lag on the screen. It has nothing to do with my computer. It's unfortunately the iPhone's AirPlay, which is what Reflector works through. So, today I wanted to do the first episode of the Unsung Heroes of Summoner's War, because, as we all know, there is a little bit of a level 40 mentality, elitist mentality here, where, you know, people are like, oh, that monster sucks, when really, if you are a low level, that monster could be really, really, really helpful. So, I'm gonna talk today about a little monster called Taharus. Yes, that's how you say his name. So let me move that a little so you can see him better. Taharus is the awakened version of the Wind Elemental. Now this is where things get a little bit confusing, because in this game there is a high elemental, there is the normal elemental, and then there's the low elemental. I'm talking about the plain elemental. And I know he really doesn't seem very impressive in his, normal unawakened form. He is summoned as a 2-star, which is generally seen as being pretty weak, but he does have one really specific use that a lot of people overlook, but shouldn't be. So, one thing that we must look at is his skills. He has a skill called Lightning Claw. That is his basic attack, which means it has no cooldowns. He attacks the enemy with sharp lightning claws and inflicts continuous damage for 2 turns if you get a critical hit. So that means if you get a critical hit, you're pretty much guaranteed. Of course, resistance and accuracy does come into play. In case you are not aware, accuracy and resistance are both stats that fight each other. In other words, if you have accuracy up, you have kind of a higher chance of, actually successfully landing something against somebody with resistance. So, it's pretty complicated. They just counter each other. So somebody with high resistance might not have a debuff applied to them by somebody with low accuracy. But if you have high accuracy versus a high resistance guy, that kind of cancels each other out and the debuffs fly. It's a little more complicated than that, but I don't want to make it too crazy for you guys. But basically put, continuous damage is a debuff that takes away 5% of the enemy's HP. So for 2 turns, that means 5% one turn and 5% the second turn. Now, this doesn't seem that impressive. I'll go into this a little later about what Taharus does really, really well. First, let me go over the rest of his abilities. Solid Blades increases your attack power and your crit rate for 3 turns, and your attack bar increases by 50%, which means that if you use this ability, you'll be halfway closer to using an ability again, getting your turn back. But also your attack power and critical rate is buffed for 3 turns, which is pretty good as far as buffs go. A lot of buffs go for 2 turns, maybe 1 turn. 3 turns is pretty much on the higher end. And then finally, we have his best ability, which of course has the highest cooldown. And of course, my Taharus has all of his skills maxed. It's very easy to max his skills because he is, after all, a 2-star. You'll be getting plenty of elementals just from Unknown Scrolls, from the magic shop, wherever. His last ability is Assassinate. Inflicts a deep wound to the target, leaving 2 continuous damage effects for 3 turns. Now this is a little bit confusing, but basically it's 2 debuffs of continuous damage that last for 3 turns. So 5 and 5 every turn for 3 turns. So that means 10% every turn, which is pretty ridiculous. So, in other words, he's pretty darn useful. He can do a lot of damage through continuous damage. And you might be wondering, okay, well, he's really squishy, right? He's a 2-star, and, if I look over at his info, he does not have any runes on, but you can see he has a really low defense. His speed is pretty good. His attack is pretty good, but his HP is pretty low. And he's right now, the one that I have is, I've evolved him up to 4 stars and awakened him. But simply put, he's not amazing when it comes to survivability. So he's not really that great when you use him in Arena, or use him in Guild Wars or something like that. But where he really, really shines are the really tough bosses that have high defense or high HP. And 2 of those that a lot of newbies get really frustrated with is the water dungeon boss and the light dungeon boss. These 2 have either really high HP or really high defense, and generally just take forever to kill. Now, because Taharus deals percentage-based damage, percentage of the whole HP, that's a nice workaround to trying to get through the crazy amounts of HP and defense. With Taharus, with a good crit rate is the most important thing for him, because crit rate does affect his assassinate ability, and also assassinate, no, I meant lightning claw, sorry. He inflicts the critical, continuous damage for 2 hits if you get a critical hit. But also what's really important is accuracy. So if you give him attack, accuracy, and crit rate, he'll be awesome. You can pretty much put any kind of build on him. Fatal Blade for runes. You could do Swift if you want him to hit a lot. But honestly, you don't really need him that fast. You just need him to get those hits in. But definitely you do want to put Blade, because Blade, once you have a set of 2 Blade runes, you get that plus 12 crit rate, which can be the difference between actually putting on those continuous damage debuffs from Lightning Claw or not. Honestly, I have him on an alt and I use Fatal Blade. But I'm sure you could try Rage Blade if you had Rage runes. But to make a long story short, he can make quick work of the Water Dungeon boss and the Light Dungeon boss. And even in early incarnations of dragons and giants, although he might take a lot of damage, if you put a few HP runes on him or something like that, he might have a little more survivability if you have a good healer. But either way, he pretty much does a great job in melting those bosses that otherwise take forever to kill. So, don't completely discount this guy. A lot of people say, oh no, he's food, don't use him. But early in the game, he will be your best friend in taking down those bosses. So anyway, that is Taharus, one of the unsung heroes of Summoner's War, at least in my opinion. Hope this helps you out. Anyway, until next time.